Hey coaches, athletes, Michael Hughes here, Gymnazo EDU, in our second installment of Tweakology, covering this joint right here, the good old-fashioned knee. Got to give credit to the Great Institute for teaching me about Tweakology, inventing the word, and all the different aspects that can go into modifying a session, a workout, an environment of training and conditioning on the fly, making it happen so as the coach, as the athlete, can go into it and making sure that success is happening even though there's dysfunction going on in every single person. In this video, I'm going to be covering the muscle anatomy of the knee, all the major players, and then the common exercises, dysfunctions, and tweaks associated with the knee, and dive into it. Now again, there's a revolutionary process happening in the fitness and athletic industry, and it's being fueled from the knowledge that in the past has only been held by those who could obtain a six-figure graduate degree. But even then, that knowledge has been vastly incomplete in its application. It is Gymnazo's EDU goal to share that knowledge and therefore enable the greater capability of those individuals who have the most power and capacity to positively help the greatest number of people. And those are the movement trainers of the world. That's us. That's me. But before us trainers can do that, we need to know more about how and why the human body functions the way it does. Not just from a textbook or traditional education, but from the multitude of methodologies that are rooted in the principles of physics, biology, and behavioral sciences, or the applied functional sciences. It is then we movement trainers can fill the gap that has been in the void of our healthcare system. So let this series just be a little bit of information to kind of whet the palate, get you on a starting point on how to think about human movement in a way that training and conditioning really needs it in the environment that once we become well educated and are able to think and process in a principles first thought process, then the vast majority of us have that capacity and capability to train and condition every athlete and client that has the amazing opportunity to be in front of this thought process. So if you want to join that revolution, hit the subscribe button. If you like and want to support this revolution, hit the like button. And if you really want to dive into it, check out our MDMC mentorship, where we dive super deep into everything that we're going to be talking about. Check it out in the link in the description below. But without further ado, let's get into the muscle anatomy of the knee. Now, the knee has essentially two massive parts, right? Our lower half, the tib and fib, our upper half, the femur, but also that kneecap, the patella, that is essentially just hanging out, flowing with everything that's going on. So those are the kind of the four bones. The muscles, it's not four. It's 5 times that amount at the very least. Right? We're talking about 20 different plus muscles just in the local neighborhood of in that knee, and why it is the joint that is so complex and so often faulted. Right, so we're going to talk about the soleus, the gastroc, the deep layers of the posterior calf, the quadriceps, these 4 muscles, the adductors, these 5 muscles, and then we go to the glutes, those 3 muscles, but then like the posterior hip complex, right? We got like 6 other deep little suckers in there that definitely affect the knee. Can't forget about the TFL going into the IT band, and then all the cruciate ligaments that surround it and encapsulate that knee and keep it as a stable joint. So we have to understand all those major players before we can dive into the biomechanics of the knee. Now, the knee is a 3-dimensional joint. Yes, it likes to flex, and yes, it likes to extend. No question, but it is 3D. It has a valgus and a varus, which are not bad movements. Yes, it has ability to spin internally and externally rotating, in sync and out of sync, not that much, but it's really heavily influenced by the ankle foot and by this hip. And it's really a pass-through joint, right? Whatever that ankle foot and that hip do, the knee says, I have to come into play. But it's not just general, right? It's different for men and women. Women have a different hip configuration than men do, which is going to put women to much more of a valgusing position. Again, not a bad thing, just necessarily understanding how good is it and when it's good, and when it's not good, how to dive into it. Right, and then check it out and make sure it's nice and set. So this knee can be trained for mobility, but really it's an adaptability to handle uncommon movements. Right, we should be able to train that knee to manage a heavy valgus, to be able to manage that rotation And it's really, how do we do that? Well, it's really going after all the anatomy that I previously mentioned, those 20 other muscle groups, and that's just the limb, that's just the lower limb. We're not even talking about the thoracic spine and how that influences the knee, which it definitely does. Don't mistake in that. So it's one of our most complicated joints, not because of its simplicity in movement, right? Because of the integration and how many influences the knee has. So knee pain could happen all the way because of lack of shoulder motion on the same side or opposite side, and how it feeds and trickles down. So don't misplace this joint as being just a kicker, right? Just a nice little straightened back. It is way more than that. And as we get into the common dysfunctions and the exercises that go with it, we have to kind of understand one of the basics, which is just squatting, right? And we're just to take squatting, but also the ballistic aspect of squatting, the jumping or leaving ground. Now, generally, we just have kind of knee pain. There's so many different ways to call knee pain. You know, you got runner's knee and da-da-da-da-da and all. What it generally means is there is discomfort around this aspect of the knee, whether it be front, back, inside. It's basically, we're just going to call it general knee pain because that's all your clients or athletes care about in a workout scenario. So what happens when they're squatting and have knee pain? Well, I'm going to go to the easy two that we shouldn't forget, and I don't want to miss it in this video, is decreased load. Are you loading the tissue too quickly? Can the connective tissue manage that stacking too fast? Is it too fast? And more than likely, it very well can be, so I can't miss saying that. What about the range of motion? Are you going too deep too soon? Is this lower back, hip complex, ankle, foot not giving you the range of motion, so the knee has to create more range of motion, especially in the frontal plane and transverse plane, as it can't get more sagittal, so it dives in other places. So we have to understand that we have to think about decreasing load, decreasing range of motion in a workout, and just see what happens, first and foremost. But the big tweaking, the big thing I want you to really take out of this video is what we call tweaking in or tweaking out. Now, tweaking in means that we're going to apply more muscle connective tissue friends to support the knee. Tweaking out means that we're going to remove those friends and have the knee joint kind of by itself a little bit more. We're going to be talking tweaking in more and bringing more people to the party. A quick way to do that, just to show you, just as an example, I'll bring out the wedge again because it's so simple. If I have a more dorsiflexed position or an upward ramp position on that wedge, and I step onto it, my foot is going to dorsiflex sooner. Therefore, my soleus, or my deep calf, is going to therefore go under tension sooner. Therefore, if it's a healthy soleus, has good elasticity, it's going to therefore decelerate my lower leg sooner, giving my knee, if it had lack of support, more support sooner. Therefore, make my knee feel more stable, as an example. Right? So that's just a quick example to understand like what we're talking about bringing friends into the party as we talk about this more and more. Understanding that position tweaks as well, right? So position tweaks, if I do a squat, just what we call square stance, I'm basically allowing a balancing between front thigh, back thigh, lateral thigh, middle thigh, rotational thigh, legs, just to say, I hope everything's balanced. But what if you split your feet to right foot in front of left? Right? What if we do a squat just like this? Well, what are the differences between these knees? Well, we have a lot of videos and podcasts just on this exact topic. But for in a workout, I've now, my right knee's feeling a little bit of discomfort on the way down. If I put my right foot in front, I now have less knee flexion, therefore less tension on that joint on this side. I had to make up for it by putting more tension here, but I reduce tension there. Interesting. I actually have more glute loading faster sooner with my knee in front because my hip flexes faster sooner than if my foot's behind me. I have more relative extension here, more relative flexion here, so therefore more posterior chain activation, tension, support, right? Bringing friends into the party. These guys are helping out the knee. Well, what if I go wide? Well, I'm now bringing my adductors into the party more and removing my lateral musculature less. Well, if I go narrow, well, the exact opposite's true. I'm removing my adductors from the party and bringing in more lateral or posterior hip. What if I go toe open with my squat, right? Now, what same thing's kind of happening with wide. I'm bringing much more externally rotated adductors to the party and decreasing tension in my posterior chain. Opposite of that is also true. If I go toe in a little bit, this is not a bad position. It's just the opposite of going toes out. I'm bringing more posterior chain, more rotational chain of the glutes, hamstrings into the party and removing my adductors from that party. Now, because the glutes are much more powerful muscles than the adductors and have a lot more tension in them typically, it reduces our range of motion, but doesn't mean that you are going to have bad knees because of that. In fact, you may save a knee from that. And that has happened to a client of mine, just that exact story, by simply toeing in on a squat. Boom, knees had the ability to restore themselves, and it's a long story short. 5 years later, she's doing Spartan Tough Mudders, when no one else said that the knee would be ever functional again. I digress. Also, we got to think about tension, right? If you can also think about adding a band into a person's workout, throw that on so it's around the knees, and now I can just push against that band. You're restoring tension to the posterior lateral hip complex. And if that knee is moving too much, we'll add some tension through here, which reduces knee motion, which is typically the problem. The knee's moving too much. Then the glutes say, wait, this is what it's like to be activated. This is what it feels like to have the appropriate amount of tension, therefore to keep that knee from over going crazy because the knee's the hip is under more control. So don't forget about this band concept, right? It's a huge, huge win, just like the wedge, just like your foot positions. But let's not forget about what the upper body can do. I can drive my upper body to influence how my hips work, which influence how my knees work. So if I have a overhead squat, or let's just call it a normal squat, just some air squats, right? Well, what if I take my hands and do a forward reach with that squat, and I go as far as I can? Well, I'm going to start creating more forward body positioning, or essentially my gravitational pull is going to want to throw me that way. Well, for me to counterbalance, not fall on my face, my hips are going to shoot backwards more. What happens when my hips get into more flexion? I get more tension back here. So therefore, where my hands go, my hips want to go the opposite. For me to stay balanced, I get more tension here. My knee reduces its tension or has more support. I can take that same concept and rotate, right? As I do a rotational reach, I get more internal rotation at my hip joint, therefore getting more glute loading in the transverse plane. That could be a way to support that knee, but could also be the exact same way to help the other knee, as maybe there's too much tension in your hip, too much tension in your posterior lateral hip. If I do a squat and rotate the opposite way, now I put more tension in the opposite side adductor, removing tension from my opposite side glute, and that could be the same way that the opposite knee says, thanks for the relief on that squat. I can rock and roll by doing a simple squat just with a little bit of rotation. There's more to go with that, but I want you to kind of open your mind on how many different ways we can influence the knee because the knee has so many influences. What about a lunge, right? What about a common good old-fashioned lunge, which we do so much on? Well, we can take that exact same thought process from before with squats and add it into a lunge. No different as maybe doing a lunge with a slight toe in to incorporate more tension through this posterior lateral hip. I can do the same thing with a little bit of a toe out, and that may look, that's dangerous. That's putting the knee at greater exposure. It may, but also may be doing the exact opposite, because now I get more tension through my adductors because this is over tense, right? You got to be thinking about it. Don't just think about what the book says is good or bad. You got to think about what the body's presenting to you and what different positions can do to make that knee more successful. That's all that really matters, is can you coach athletes, or can you, the athlete, make sure your workout is successful by not being in dogma mode of what is right and wrong, but processing what can be right and wrong. So it's a big play. So I can also do the same thing. Instead of a foot position, I can do an angulation by just doing a lateral lunge. It's programmed to do a forward lunge. Well, why not just change that same thing into a lateral lunge? You're still lunging, right? Why not take it into a rotational lunge? It's adding different angulations into the process that is still a lunge to that athlete, to that client. So why not change it up to make them successful? Again, we can use the same thing with our hands as we did with our squats. I don't want to take that away. It's just adding the same components to our reaches, whatever it is, to make sure you saw where that knee did, right? It changed where it went based on where my hands go. All good things to take into consideration when we want to tweak our driving, or the driving of our hands. We call it tweaking the driver on how that knee can position itself. And what about the last one, locomotion, right? With locomotion, whether it's be a running drill, whatever the case is, a cone drill, speed ladder drill, right? All those different things where the knee just not feeling it too much. Well, the one thing that we can really do is change it up a lot, right? So a lot of kind of step patterns we do, right? A lot of kind of step patterns we do as we step up and step down off boxes. I'll turn that around, step down off boxes, right? There's so many different ways that we can get up and off a locomotion in a sense, with the EV box jumps as well. But think about, you don't always have to do something forwards. In fact, going backwards may take away all that knee discomfort. Maybe taking it sideways takes away all that knee discomfort. Maybe splitting your feet and then doing a sideways shuffle takes away that knee discomfort, because it's all changing the way that the hips are positioned, and therefore those 20 plus muscles that I talked about, how they are influencing their percentages to that knee, because the percentages now change. So don't mistaken a sideways step up, or don't mistaken a lunge. I'll go back to a lunge, stepping up and 6 inches higher. My foot now has 6 inches higher, therefore my knee and hip relationship have much more flexion much sooner. So there's all these different ways that I want you to think about it in terms of how your body goes. Maybe you can do a shuffle forward, and that right knee never gets into that push-off position where it hurts, or it's the opposite way. So it's a lot to think about, but I want to give you some quick hitters for you to dive into how locomotion can change by just changing the angulation or the pre-positioning of the feet and doing those same patterns. Hope this video gave you a greater understanding of the insights of how you can start thinking about your coaching and training sessions. For all the movement practitioners out there, for all those athletes doing kind of the do-it-yourself workout, it's important that I want you to think about not where the dysfunction is, but where it's coming from and how you can influence in that to make it all happen. Now, I'm going to see you next time on our Tweakology series about the lower back, so get ready for that one. If you even want more content from Gymnazo EDU in the meantime, please check out our podcast. Please follow Gymnazo EDU on Instagram. You can also follow me, Michael Hughes, at 3D Athlete or 3D_athlete on Instagram. And I will see you guys on the next one.